Quite a while ago, I highlighted a segment from my live stream when I was playing Castle Crashers on normal mode, currently going through insane mode. I figured I'd go ahead and do my own rant talking about this, because quite honestly, it's disgusting as to how much praise there is for this game that's almost a 2-decade-old fighting game that has more re-releases than Street Fighter 2 and even Guilty Gear X. It's just disgusting. Before the SEGA fandom leaves their hate comments saying that I'm just an uneducated piece of shit, I have played through both Virtua Fighter 5 and the online edition. Yes, that's what it was called, and that's because the Virtua Fighter 5 game on the PS3 is a different revision compared to what Xbox 360 owners got. And then there was Final Showdown, which was the version that everyone got. And then there was the awfully priced Ultimate Showdown that was exclusive on PS4. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Virtua Fighter as a whole, it does have some decent gameplay, with Virtua Fighter 4 probably having the most complete package for the type of pure gameplay that it has to offer. A ranking system that actually matters, unlike in Tekken 5, which stole the ranking system from, or whatever. So I don't want to hear dipshits saying that I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't play a lot like the main man Sui, who unironically is hating on it, considering he's a Tekken fanboy, or even other pro players who are just now hopping on the bandwagon because SEGA is rebranding the game again. This is also the same company that you fucking dipshits cried that they delisted your precious Sega Genesis collections.
Maybe you should check your privilege!
The thing you have to understand with Virtua Fighter 5 is that the game is, first of all, it's almost 2 decades old, okay? Now, I don't know exactly when the game was originally released in arcades. I might have posted it on the XCOM, and of course I got people there, or, okay, maybe 1 or 2 people trying to say that, how dare you not let fighting game fans be happy that they get their reignited fighting game entry back in the main fray. The same series that killed Eternal Champions, by the way, but I guess I have to let that go too, like a Bakuma, huh? A lot of the games, even before Virtua Fighter 4, barely had much to offer as far as replay value goes. Virtua Fighter has barely evolved besides being the very first 3D fighting game, or at the very least, being the 3D fighting game that had a lot of impact and influence in other fighting games ever since then. Every game, maybe except for Virtua Fighter 3, has more or less the same cast, with maybe bringing 1 or 2 characters into the mix, and maybe slightly altering their appearances. Lao Chao is one of the few characters that actually gets older throughout the games, but yet everyone else is just kind of getting the Anna Williams treatment for their looks, I guess, and if you know that, you probably recognize that. And even though the games technically have a story, or is the reason as to why Doral and Kage and Vanessa are important to the story, these games don't even have really much of a story, if at all. They just have background information, that's about it. Legit, the Virtua Fighter story is about as important as Doom's, and the main difference is that even though Tekken at least is the most ongoing story in a fighting game, not as long compared to, say, General Hospital, but it's one that's been ongoing for a very long time. And even Tekken at least has to fall back on, besides the whole cosmetic ranking grind that the games have had ever since Tekken 5. And even before then, you at least had character endings, things to unlock, all the other stuff, adding characters that are actually interesting to play as, and not just having more or less the same characters. Hell, even characters that were scrapped in Virtua Fighter 1 barely saw the light of day, except one, but he was only in Fighter's Mega Mix, which is probably the best thing that Sega has done for the series, and yet, even that can be lacking at times, if its only main redemption is that it had a Virtua Fighter game and a clone of Virtua Fighter going at it, and that's kind of sad. Not to mention the other various characters in the game, but that's another ordeal. Not trying to say Fighter's Mega Mix is a bad game, but even then, Fighter's Mega Mix definitely is lacking in replay value for single-player content, let's be honest. You can only glaze a game that has the likes of Hornet and Bean so much before you just start to understand as to why this game is just like every other game in the series. Even people got mad at games like Guilty Gear X and Street Fighter 2 essentially rebranding their games with a new title. But at the very least, having updated backgrounds, adding things to the story to make it interesting. And that's just for the arcade releases. Even the home versions, at the very least, made you want to keep going back to those, even if the home versions weren't one-to-one arcade perfect. Gonna be one of those people for a minute, but like, even Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, whether it be on the Dreamcast with its matching service version, or something like Guilty Gear X Plus, which is a PS2 exclusive version of the game, at least there's a reason, besides the arcade experience, to keep playing the game. If a fighting game has to rely on just online to keep the players going, it's going to fail. I mean, look at Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. That game was universally hyped as the return of Budokai Tenkaichi, and even the developers mentioned that they want to focus solely on the online play, to the point that tournaments have basically tarnished the name forever, adjusting characters in ways that makes no fucking sense. All the stages will be added in split screen, which is good, because not only was the game initially launched with not having any split screen, but then the game developers changed their minds, but then only having one stage. I'm sorry, but that barely changes anything about the game. The game is still lacking in single player content, when even Budokai, the game that kind of plays like Dead or Alive, except with whatever mechanics that make Budokai so interesting, there's a reason why people liked those games, and it wasn't just because one person had to play as Broly and the other one get to play as fucking Krillin, alright? Those games had substance, subsistence, existence, and persistence as to why you kept going back. Virtua Fighter 5, even the vanilla version, barely had shit for you to go back to. The gameplay has not even evolved, literally, since Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution. And hell, even that game, at the very least, took away the expansive tutorial mode that people say you need a PhD to play Virtua Fighter, when Virtua Fighter 4, the vanilla version, at the very least has an expansive tutorial and encyclopedia of things that you can just look up without needing to use modem, dial-up, whatever crap, to look up how to do fancy shit. And then, of course, there was the AI creator, so that you can essentially have an AI-controlled version of a character to give the gameplay some spark and life. And even the Kumite mode in Virtua Fighter 4 got annoying after a while. It was essentially what Tekken 5's arcade mode is, except every single time you won a match, it would say, "Here comes a new challenger." Don't you think it'd be a little annoying after a while? Hence why Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution introduced a quest mode, which is probably the closest thing to actually having an actual story mode, since SEGA basically, once again, they killed off Eternal Champions, a game that, if it were to be alive today, could literally compete with the likes of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat for having stories that actually make sense, and one of the few IPs in existence that doesn't completely shit on the time travel mechanic as a whole, with something like Time Splitters coming in a close second, but that's just me being biased right there. With Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown not having a quest mode, and instead making you pay money for DLC that has costumes, just to be able to play in a specialized battle mode, why do people think that having yet another version of Virtua Fighter 5 is going to be Sega's breadwinner? The same people who are probably excited that Virtua Fighter 5 is getting another entry in the series, even though, yes, I know that Virtua Fighter 6 is coming soon, but who knows when that will be. They've been saying that shit for a very long-ass time. And all we get now is just Ultimate Showdown 2.0, but rebranded as something completely different into making people think that it is different. Except it's not. There's been an update for Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, and I highly doubt it added anything significant besides maybe rebalancing the entire cast of some shit. And that shit was a fucking waste of $40, by the way. With the only reason people even buying that shit was because it was free to download for the first month or so, or whatever. However how long it was. That show is a fucking joke. A one-player only arcade mode, Dural not even being playable, even though they have made it playable in the past. It's just Sega refuses to actually balance the fucking character to make your tournament viable. I can't speak on Fighter's Mega Mix, because who knows how whack the balance in that game is, but if fucking Arc System Works can rebalance characters like Cliff and Justice to be perfectly viable in their latest Guilty Gear XX Accent Core Plus R to be playable despite those characters being banned for a long-ass time due to the fact that they were pretty much dead by the story point, but rebalanced for tournament play, with maybe at worst Cliff not being super damaging and Justice losing her mobility, but it was still something that can be tournament legal compared to what David Serlin tried to do with Akuma in HC Remix. Tried to make him balanced, but he still ended up being broken as shit. Which is kind of sad, to be honest. I just don't get why people are excited. And before people say, oh, well, the game is a fair price now. Yes, you're right. It's only $20 on Steam. But there's also a deluxe edition that's fucking $50. And what do you get? More cosmetic crap and other DLC that was more than likely repurposed from Ultimate Showdown, which is just the Yakuza DLC, which is funny because I'm pretty sure one of the people who worked in the game said that we can't have Kiryu, if I'm even saying his name correctly, fucking cry in the comments because I can't pronounce Satsuki correctly. I don't even fucking care about that anymore. We can't have him in a fighting game because he doesn't hurt women or whatever, and then the only way he would be playable is to pull a Jump Force, and by having one of the characters from One Piece, whose name I can't remember right now, literally doing no damage to other... I'm pretty sure even Popeye could break that rule at least to be tournament viable, but again, Jump Force wasn't made to be tournament viable, just more or less an accurate portrayal of how the characters worked, even if it sacrificed game balance, but tell that to Sparking Zero fandom, because they sure as shit did not get the memo. And speaking of Dragon Ball, it's also kind of insane that these same people will say that, oh, well, Bandai Namco should just make a Xenoverse 3. No, they're not. You kidding me? Toriyama passing away, which is still very tragic, by the way. They're still doing updates for Xenoverse 2 to this day, and the game's been out for almost a decade now, I think. It's going to be a decade and maybe a year or two from now. And the game is still pumping out content. Virtua Fighter 5 could have been that. Just pump out content for Virtua Fighter 5. Give quest mode on all versions of the game. And whatever remaster, whatever you want to call it. Just add the content that was previously existing from other versions and just put it on there. I mean, Street Fighter does that all the time. Look at Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, SF4 AE 2012. Whatever balance that there was in between, I don't remember. And then, of course, Ultra Street Fighter 4, with the option to have not only being able to play as previous versions of characters, but having a new moveset which hardly changed much of the game. And you can't really use it that much against the computer unless you do versus mode. Which is kind of shitty, honestly, because having Ken throwing fireballs at his feet is, that would definitely give the Footkumers more reasons to play their game, especially when Manon literally exists, and Capcom literally degraded Jury from an actual badass into foot porn enthusiast that would give that Let's Player a run for his money. I forget his name, but there's a reason why people mock that type of shit, dude. It's just fucking weird and creepy. Especially how he did it, I feel no sympathy for that person. So, you're probably wondering, well, how would you fix Virtua Fighter 5? First of all, adds quest mode, and lets you play as Durl, even if you have to completely nerf her down to the ground, at the sake of her being playable, maybe reduce her damage or something, make her move slower or something. I mean, Sega changes a lot of shit in these games, yet it was immensely disappointing to play a new version of Virtua Fighter 5 at the time and not be able to unlock Durl after beating her once, compared to using every fucking character in the game, or tediously going through Kumite mode unless you collected the 7 orbs, Dragon Balls, or going through quest mode in Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, and then buying her with currency, and even in those two games, you can only use in fucking Versus and Training. Can't even use her in arcade mode. Virtua Fighter 5 at least changed that, but they fucking axed it in Final Showdown, dude. Why did they have to make this character so special so you can't even use her in other modes? As Admiral McFish put it when he covered Durl in his video, it's just fucking draconian. She's not this super unique character. She's just a fucking alpha version of Alpha 152 from Dead or Alive. It's fucking stupid. Instead of goo without the sex organs, and yes, I'm gonna say that because, well, fuck it. Durl is just a metal version with her name being inspired by the cheat code that lets you fucking play as the bitch. And she's bald. Let that sink in. Also, obviously, point number 3, having all the music from previous Virtua Fighter 5 entries, as well as having the backgrounds and even the balance versions, so that you can actually pretty much play a combination of all Virtua Fighter 5 releases up to that point. I think there was even another Virtua Fighter 5 release that did not hit home versions, but then they changed that when Final Showdown was a thing. It would at least kind of make sense to have a version of Virtua Fighter 5 to have what version of Virtua Fighter 5 characters would be best against another one, but no. This version's just going to be, we're going to make Virtua Fighter 5 have a shitty arcade mode with no reason to play it beyond the second time to gain that one trophy, having a training mode that may or may not be useful, and of course having the online play that's going to be dead in a fucking week because there's no crossplay. And the best part, it's only going to be released on PC. Yeah, remember those people complaining that Ultimate Showdown was only released on PS4 and people had to buy a PS4 just to play Ultimate Showdown? Bloodborne's a thing, first of all. And second of all, who the fuck is going to buy a PC just to play a fighting game that's going to barely have any fucking content to begin with? It ain't a first-person shooter, it ain't a real-time strategy game, it's not a fucking MOBA, it ain't an MMORPG, and it's sure as shit not an adult game that will never be released on consoles. So why lock this game to another fucking platform that just because more people are playing it, is it really worth it to having to do a system requirements check just to play a game that's going to be literally dead on arrival?
No!
There's not going to be a fucking quest mode. There's not going to be Durl. The most interesting thing that Ultimate Showdown has was a spectator mode that lets you watch people play online against each other, which is kind of weird, but it's kind of interesting in a way, but that ain't fucking good enough, alright? I'm so tired of these people who only play fighting games online thinking that these games have to focus on the online player or else nobody's gonna fucking play it. Even non-fighting games like Super Smash Bros. At least understands that. They just add in shitty guest characters to give more fun and flavor to the autists who want to spectate them. What shitty horror game character is going to be added into Smash? Whatever. Sega is not doing anyone favors, at least on my end, about having this version be milked. And I highly doubt that even with the $20, it is sure as shit not going to be worth it. Someone on Steam mentioned it's going to be a Discord fighter in maybe a week. Yeah, I can see that happening. But hey, Sega is back, guys, including Capcom. Because they're bringing back dormant IPs. Yeah, I can trust about this Capcom as far as I can spit. You seen their track record lately? That could be a whole nother rant in itself. But let's see what they are cooking first before I cuck them out of sales. That's all I got to say about Virtua Fighter 5 R.E.V.O. This shit is fucking stupid, and if you disagree, you're just a fucking entitled fanboy who thinks that Sega does no wrong, except you'll fucking cry about your Genesis games that you never played back in the day, but then get mad at people for emulating that stupid retarded shit.